Thank you. You're very, very kind. Thank you. Welcome to a wonderful day. It may be the first time that Katie and I have been together on stage, working together as a team, looking at some of the things that I think are going to be very, very powerful in a life-changing day. I have always been a huge, huge fan of hers and have done the work myself, and you're all in for a great treat this afternoon. I have undertaken a project. I started on January the 1st of this year, and I'll be finishing it on December the 31st. It's a new book that I'm living. For the first time, I think, in my life, I've begun to do something that is having more of an impact on me than I think it'll have on anyone who reads it. It has changed my life in a very profound and dramatic way every day. I was listening to the whole controversy around James Fry and A Million Little Pieces. Most of you know what I'm speaking about, I think, don't you? Well, there was a huge bestseller last year. It's called A Million Little Pieces, and it was about a young man who had been a drug addict and an alcoholic, had tried every kind of drug that there was, and ended up at the beginning of the book being dropped off up in Minnesota at a rehab center. And the story is a story of his experience going through 6 weeks of intense rehab, trying to get himself clean from this life of drugs that he had been participating in since he was about 15 or 16 years old, and he was in his late 20s at this time. Well, it became a very hugely popular bestseller because it was beautifully written, and he went on Oprah, and then they discovered that it was just an amazing insight. They found out that someone who does drugs doesn't always tell the truth. As my daughter said, duh. It was published as a memoir, and there's sort of a loose interpretation of what it means to write a memoir, and whether this comes under the category of fiction or nonfiction, or whether you're allowed to play with facts and so on. And all of this controversy could have been resolved with a brief little paragraph at the beginning of the book that said some of the facts in the book have been altered to make the story better, or to protect the people who were a part of the experience that he went through, or whatever. But that wasn't in there, and so he went on Oprah, and then she found out that he had fabricated some of the details. But in the whole process of all of that, Oprah being concerned about what had it done for her reputation and whether or not these facts were true or not, was the much larger picture of how many people who were really profoundly impacted as drug addicts and alcoholics, and were able to come out of that world, that imprisoned world. And it's very close to me in my life, because in my own family I have one of my children who right now, today, is profoundly struggling with that very same thing, and has been for the past 10 years or so. So I'm sensitive to it as well. Anyway, A Million Little Pieces was deeply impactful to many, many people. And the controversy stirred, and I saw this young man being raked through the coals because he had changed some of the facts and so on, and that became the whole emphasis on this book. So I called James and told him that I would be absolutely willing to publish anything that he wrote in the future. And my publisher agreed to that. While he was going through this rehabilitation experience of his, he came across a book that I had read when I was taking a philosophy course back at the university, and at the University of Michigan in 1964. 1965, I think it was, or 1966. It's a book that was written 2,500 years ago. I remember when I was reading it, I was touched by it, and I remember saying, it's about time they wrote something like this. And then I found out that that old line that when the student is ready, the teachers will appear, became very, very clear, because it had been out there for thousands of years, 500 years before the Bible for the New Testament was even thought of. And the book is called the Tao Te Ching, or the Book of the Way. And it's the foundation for the practice. It's not a religion, as I've been researching Taoism, which is spelled Taoism, Tao, the Tao. The word Tao is just a word that means the way. And the opening line of the Tao says, the Tao that can be named is not the Tao. So the minute that you put a label on it, you've lost it. It is something that transcends dualities, beginnings and ends. It's the word for the source, the word for all that is. And one of the most profound teachings of the Tao is that the Tao does nothing, but it leaves nothing undone. And it's a really profound teaching. I remember when I sat down to write the book Inspiration, Your Ultimate Calling. And I called it Your Ultimate Calling because I really believed that it is our calling to live an inspired life. And an inspired life is a life in which we return ourselves back to spirit. One of the verses in the Tao speaks about the return trip, that those who understand the way understand that we show up here from an invisible source, and our whole objective in being here is to return to it. It's a return trip. And constantly I call this the state of God realization, that it's within each and every one of us. If we decide that we're going to make this return trip and live a God-realized life, which has absolutely nothing to do with religion. It's funny, I was reading Matthew Fox last night, Original Blessing, his answer to original sin. And I came across a quote from Carl Jung. Now, I was a Jungian therapist. I studied Carl Jung a great deal when I was in a doctoral student. And Carl Jung, I didn't know that he had said this. I looked up the quote last night. He said, the surest way to lose your soul is to believe in a God outside of yourself. And then he said, there's an awful lot of people who have gone to church on a regular basis who've been on a one-way trip to losing their soul, who believe in something that is external to ourselves. And if you begin to study this idea of a God or a source or a spirit or an intelligence that is not something that is external to you, but that in fact is you, is the source of all of us. In the Tao, they call this the world of the 10,000 things. And the 10,000 things is just the ultimate number to represent everything that is in the material world. So that everything that originates in the world of source, in the world of non-being, all being comes from that place. And all the great spiritual texts that have been written about this have always intrigued me, and the number around it is, when I sat down to write Inspiration, I knew that I was going to write 18 chapters. And somehow that number has always been intriguing. You know? And it's an interesting in spiritual text that the number 18 stands for one infinite source. One infinite source, 18. So all of you born on the 18th, you know, you get something for nothing today. Some advice, is what you get. So, but reading the Bhagavad Gita, the Hindu Bible, the text that was written thousands of years ago, also contemporaneously with the Tao, had 18 verses in it, 18 chapters. It's Krishna, God, speaking to his disciple, Arjuna, who is on a battlefield and about to go into battle, and his charioteer, who's just ready to take him into this battle, and the two armies are lined up on either side of this great field, and they're off to go and slaughter each other. And as they're getting ready to make this one more attempt at war and killing and battles and so on, Arjuna speaks to his charioteer, who is really God, speaking to him. And in 18 verses, he gives him the book that Gandhi read every day and based his life upon, the Bhagavad Gita, the way of the Lord. And you can all read it in about an hour and a half or 2 hours. You can read the whole Bhagavad Gita, and the same with the Tao. But you can spend a lifetime studying it and contemplating it and being involved in it. It's the same number of holes on a golf course. I don't know, there's something about that maybe has something. And so I hadn't really thought about this, and then when I heard James Fry speaking, when I read the book and then listened to him on a few of the interviews, and then read the book even more carefully, I discovered that the only thing that helped him through the entire process of this recovery and overcoming this horrendous addiction from heroin and crack cocaine and vodka and everything that you could possibly think of was reading the Tao. And I decided that if it had that kind of an impact on him, and I sent a copy to my daughter, who, as I said, struggles with these addictions, I decided that I was going to go back and look at the Tao again. And as I opened it up, guess how many verses, how many chapters there are in the Tao? No, there are not 18. But it's the same number. 81. Infinite source once. Infinite source once. 1881. And I had done 18 chapters for the inspiration books. And as I talked to James Fry, I discovered that he had picked up a copy of the Tao Te Ching. Now, the Tao Te Ching has, I'm just giving a conservative estimate. I think there are maybe 2,500 to 3,000 translations of the Tao. So that when you read the Tao, you're reading somebody's translation of it. And it's ancient Chinese language written at the same time. He was a contemporary of Confucius. So it goes way back. And trying to find out exactly the idioms and what was being said here, because Lao Tzu never wrote a word of it from all the things that I could find out about it. He just dictated it as he decided to leave this world that he was in and go off and live in harmony with the Tao. And his dictation was recorded supposedly by a gatekeeper, and it has survived all of these years. But the translation that James read and studied and practiced every day, and throughout a million little pieces, he would have these little references to how what it was said in the Tao really made sense to him in terms of his sobriety and in terms of him changing what it is that he was living and experiencing. And he decided that this was perhaps the most important book he had ever read, and it just kept coming back at me. So there are always weird kind of, Jung called them synchronicities, but there's these, it just kept coming back at me. And so I went and found the edition of the Tao that he had read that touched him so deeply, and he had forgotten also to give credit to the translator of this particular book, but he was advised to do so, and he did in future editions, as well as adding a little paragraph as a disclaimer, because to me it was important that the words that's in there be circulated to as many people who are struggling with addictions as possible. So this one that he read was translated by a fellow named Stephen Mitchell. And I found that out when I was up in Wyoming with Katie, Byron Katie, who sits right over here in the front row, and you'll be listening to this afternoon, one of the most fascinating afternoons of your life. Oh, by the way, this is Katie's husband. She is married to Stephen Mitchell, and he's sitting right there. Stand up, Stephen. I want all of you to meet. He's one of the great scholars alive today, Stephen Mitchell. And I've read about 25 translations of the Tao this year, and this is by far my favorite. He put it into words that are applicable to all of us today. I don't think we have that here, but you can find it in bookstores any place. So, as I am writing, I decided that I was going to write a book called Change the Way You Look at Life and the Life You're Living Changes. Living the Tao. And since January the 1st of this year, I have been reading, I have this wonderful job. It's just the greatest job. I can't even visualize that I could have predicted this when I was bagging groceries and delivering pizzas back in Detroit in the 1950s. But this wonderful job, and they pay me, you can't even believe, I don't even want to tell you what they pay me for doing it, but I can't even count it. I need new calculators, all right? And my job is to read a verse of the Tao Te Ching, the first verse, and to contemplate it. Some of this is going to be weird. But, when you get to be 66, it's, you just don't care anymore, And so if it sounds a little strange, it sounds a little strange. But I have created this space where I live over on Maui. And I have drawings of Lao Tzu. There was no cameras in those days. You may remember 2,500 years ago, people had just started crawling out of caves in some places. But there are renderings, there are drawings, there are people who have different visions and versions of what he looked like. He's often portrayed on an ox. And so my job is to take these 81 verses and to read one of them and then to contemplate it for 2 or 3 days. Just to walk and to swim, to do yoga, to do all of the things that are just a part of my life every day, and then to sit down in this spectacular, beautiful space that I have created, a place where there are statues and there are crystals and there are photos of my children and there are just wonderful mementos, and it's like it's an energy place. I encourage you to do this sort of thing in your own home, to find a place, someplace, a corner of a room someplace, and make it your sacred spot. This is a place where I always have a candle burning, as long as I'm awake. Actually, I have 3 candles burning. And when I'm in that space, when I walk by it, it's like a dining room in my place on Maui. And as I walk by it, the energy shifts in the room, in the house. And I feel myself being drawn into it. And sometimes it feels like it's beckoning me. In fact, I feel it right now. So I got to leave. I'm sorry, I've got to, no. And as I walk by it and it entices me to go in there, I get up, if you saw the Inspiration PBS special, I get up 3:15 every morning or so, between 3 and 4 a.m. Because it's a very special time, and it's, again, something that I encourage you to think about. As Rumi said, the breeze at dawn has secrets to tell you. Do not go back to sleep. Do not go back to sleep. Do not go back to sleep. And there's very nurturing, significant message in that poem of Rumi. Do not go back to sleep. Because if you can fight the desire, almost everyone wakes up sometime between 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. When you're my age, you usually think, well, it's prostate time, go pee and get back to bed. It's no big deal, all right? But there's a calling. These things that occur to us, that happen to us, that are sort of habitual with us. When we wake up, we look at the clock, and very often it'll be the same time. Oftentimes it'll be the exact same moment that we find ourselves awakening, being called to an awakening. And we just say, oh, that's great. Or we have all these great ideas, and we say, you know what? Tomorrow I'm going to do this. Tomorrow I'm getting up. But right now, if I were to get up right now, let's see, if I got up right this moment, and it's 3:30, and I've got to go to work, and I'll be 2 hours deficient, so I'm going to be tired all day long. If I do that, I better get to sleep instead. And this is just conditioned thinking. It's thoughts. And a big part of today's presentation that Katie and I agreed on is that this is going to be about your thoughts, about what kind of thoughts that you have. How do you think? And the question that you're going to be asking yourself is very often is the thought that I'm thinking, is it a thought that is true, or is it a thought that is not true? Is there falsehood built into the thoughts? Because the estimate is that we have about 60,000 separate thoughts every day. The only problem is we have the same 60,000 today that we had yesterday. And then we're going to have the same 60,000 again tomorrow. And then you begin to ask yourself the question of these separate 60,000 thoughts that are just constantly whipping through my consciousness all the time, just seem to be coming out of nowhere. How many of them are true? I mean, how many of them can bear up to the test of truth, that these things are true? Because when you have a thought in your head that isn't true, it changes your whole physiology. What you'll be able to see, particularly this afternoon, as Katie does her work up here with you, is that thoughts that are not true are not just thoughts that keep you from being happy. They're not just thoughts that keep you from having a divine relationship. They're not just thoughts that keep you from attracting abundance into your life. They are thoughts that weaken you physically. These are muscle tests, kinesiology. The heart is a muscle. Every organ of your body is supported by and surrounded by muscles. So that when you're having thoughts, any kind of a thought that is not true, that thought is shortening your life. Literally shortening your life. I have now finished 67 verses of the Tao. And I've written 67 essays on when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And this isn't just a clever play on words here. This is a quantum truth. As my friend Deepak Chopra has often said to me, quantum physics is not only stranger than you think it is, it's stranger than you can think. So that if you look at your origination, the place that you came from, this thing that Lao Tzu called the Tao, this great source that is everywhere, there is no place that it is not. And yet it is doing nothing. And yet it leaves nothing undone. If you go out and just go for a walk this afternoon when you get home, just look at the perfection of all that is. Just look at the clouds and look at the sky and look at the ocean and look at the trees and look at the leaves, and even more important, look at the space between the leaves. And look at the invisibleness and the perfection of how everything is. There's a constancy, if you will. And this constancy is always there. And your goal, my goal, in the time that I have with you here today, is to convince you to go to a place within yourself where you can emulate that divine perfection which requires you to do nothing, which never uses force, which never pushes itself, which recognizes something. I'm going to read to you just one of the verses of the Tao and a little bit of what I wrote about it. And I seldom read to an audience because I don't like being read to myself. But I'm just going to share a little bit of this. Here's what Lao Tzu said in verse 29. Do you think you can take over the universe and improve it? I do not believe it can be done. Everything under heaven is a sacred vessel and cannot be controlled. Trying to control leads to ruin. Trying to grasp, we lose. Allow your life to unfold naturally. Know that it too is a vessel of perfection. Just as you breathe in, breathe out. There is a time for being ahead, a time for being behind, a time for being in motion, a time for being at rest, a time for being vigorous, a time for being exhausted, a time for being safe, a time for being in danger. To the sage, all of life is a movement toward perfection. So what need has he for the excessive, the extravagant, or the extreme? There's a time for everything. Imagine if you knew this. If you really knew that what you were experiencing emotionally in your life was a part of what there is a time for, and that you're not really doing anything. Lao Tzu says it over and over again. You're not doing anything. You're being done. You're being done right now. You're one of the 10,000 things. And it is all being done, all of it. Like I do yoga every morning, or almost every morning, 5-6 days a week. I do this 90-minute Bikram yoga, this hot yoga. And this has helped me so much with just that simple little thing, just remembering what it says in verse 29 of the Tao. That there are times when you're in the midst of yoga, when you have a position where you have to put this foot out, and you have to turn this one down, and you have to get down here like this, and you have to take this arm, and I'm going to do it. And you have to do that for 60 seconds in a 110-degree room. That's after doing many other postures as well. There was a time when I would do that and I'd be so exhausted, and all I could think about was, when is this 60 seconds going to be up? Oh my God, when are we going to get through with this posture? When are we going to get onto where I can lie down on the floor and finally... And I began to realize as this doing the Tao thing has really changed me dramatically, so that now when I'm in that position with one arm down and one arm up, and it is exhausting, and you're stretching, and you've got your arm right next to your ear, and you're holding on, that you say to yourself, there's a time for being exhausted, and there's a time for rest. There's a time for things not to work out. Imagine if you knew that in the midst of my working with my daughter, for example, when I see the struggle that she's going to, and I can stand back and say, there's a time for her to experience this. And there's a time for her not to experience it. If you read Katie's life, you'll see that there was a time for deep depression. There was a time for fear. There was a time for anger and worry and despair, deep despair. And when you're in those things, if you could step outside of yourself and look at it and say, there's also a time for its opposite. As long as I'm incarnated into a physical world, there's a time for all of it. And as you do, you get to a new place in your life where you begin to look at all the things that are happening to you, because you remember verse 40 of the Tao says, it's all about returning. It's all about returning. Returning to what? Returning to the place from which you originated. The first 9 months of your life, you lived inside of your mother's womb in water. And during those whole 9 months, nobody could get in there and mess around with you. Nobody could get in there and get you to worry about anything. You didn't have sonograms that you'd look at and say, my God, I don't have a nose yet. What the hell's going on? I sure hope I get a nose. And you got into nose therapy and you worry about it. Oh, what if it doesn't happen? You don't do that. And all of a sudden, perfectly, it all unfolds in exactly the way it's going to unfold, independent of your opinion about it. You're not doing anything. Nothing is left undone. You're being done. You're being completed. And you were totally, completely at peace with it. You were surrendered to it. You allowed it. It wasn't a struggle. It wasn't. And then you popped out of there. And then you said, thank you, God. Thank you, Tao. Thank you, Source. We'll take over from here. And that was the biggest mistake. All of a sudden, you took over. And you edged God out. E-G-O. You edged God out. And you took on an ego, didn't you? And what is an ego? It's just an idea. Just an idea about who you are. Instead of being a piece of God, a piece of the Source, you decided, and those around you decided, that you were something different. And if you studied quantum physics, and you took the tiny little particle that began you, and you tried to find out where it came from, and reduced it down to its tiniest subatomic properties, ultimately you would discover what Lao Tzu knew. That it's the spirit that gives life. That you didn't come from a particle. That particles do not create particles. Particles do not come from particles. Originally, all particles come from an energy. A field of energy that has no beginnings and no ends and no boundaries. And that's who you are. And returning back to that, and letting go of the idea that who you are is what you have, and who you are is who you control. I don't think there's any more all-pervasive theme in the Tao Te Ching than the idea of being a non-interferer. Do you, Stephen? I mean, isn't it? It's about not interfering, isn't it? It's about letting go. It's about allowing. It's about detaching. It's about disconnecting yourself from this belief that you are in charge of other people. I'm the father of 8 children and the father of motivation. That's what they tell me, so I've got... And as this father of 8 children, one of the things that I've recognized and what has made me, I think, a better parent, particularly even since I've been doing this, is my willingness to, I call it the bite your tongue verse of the Tao. Just hang back just for a second, just as you're about to interfere, just as you're about to lay it on and tell somebody else how they should be and what they should do and how they should do it, you step back and realize that what Khalil Gibran, the great Lebanese poet, in writing in The Prophet, said was just a basic truth. Your children are not your children. They are the products of life's longing for itself. They come through you, but not for you. And you step back, and I can't even begin to tell you how freeing it is to realize that you don't have anything to do. You don't have anyone to control. You can be at peace. And I watch, and I've become much more of an observer, even on airplanes. I was in London 5 days ago. And I don't know if you've flown in and out of Heathrow lately, but things have really changed. You know, we couldn't take anything on the plane. The terrorists, whoever they are selling fear, and we respond with more fear. Every time you use force, you create a counterforce, and then another counterforce, and before you know, and the Tao teaches us all. I mean, one of the great lessons in the Tao is that any country that has its primary resources and its energy placed on building weapons is not of the Tao. And those countries that have their consciousness located in the Tao put their energy into tractors and building homes and growing food, not building weapons. I saw a movie not too long ago with Nicolas Cage about warlords or something, the Lords of War, I think it was something like that. One of those alarming things about how much energy we are in the world creating, energy to destroy ourselves. That we have literally created from our consciousness enough weaponry on this planet to eliminate all life within just a few moments. It's all there. It's all there for us. We've allowed ourselves to move so far away from the great teachings of the great spiritual masters. And we believe that we're a Christian nation or that we're a spiritual nation when we find ourselves having moved away from these simple principles and then getting upset with other people because we can have these kind of weapons, but they can't. And we don't look hard enough at ourselves and all the ways that we have deflected ourselves from the greatest teachings of all of the great spiritual masters. When you start in yoga, I have a 1-year anniversary of doing yoga is October the 1st. That's another thing that if I can encourage even 2 or 3 of you to just get started in, no matter what. Because I was a runner my whole life. I ran, many of you possibly, I'm in many, many marathons. I ran ultra marathons, 52 miles without stopping. Yeah. And many marathons, the Greek marathon. And I got to a point in my life where I wanted to continue to be in shape and to exercise and to keep myself strong and so on. But my back and my joints and my knees and all of those things just wouldn't allow for that kind of work. So I found something which is great. You put a mat here in front of you and you don't have to leave. This is as far as you travel. This is it. That's it. You don't have to go anywhere. If I used to want to run 8 miles, I had to run 4 miles that way and come back 4 miles. Now you can do the equivalent of 8 miles, and you just have to go here. That's it. And it's an ancient practice. It's a life-giving, life-loving, profound experience. Not only does it teach you about keeping your cardiovascular system in shape and keeping yourself physically fit and so on, but it allows you also to exercise every organ of your body, including the mind. And it's something I encourage you to look at and think about. The word yoga means union. Union. It's something I just discovered experientially in the past year, but it's something that you can really put into practice and start changing the way you feel and the way you look at everything. There's no better feeling after 90 minutes of yoga than that wonderful connection that you feel to God, that source. So in the process of doing this yoga, I have discovered certain things to teach you and certain things that need to be improved upon. There are 3 factors that you learn when you go into yoga. It teaches you balance, it teaches you flexibility, and it teaches you strength. Now, most of the women, when they start yoga, are pretty good at balance and flexibility, but are very deficient in strength. Most of the men can go in there, they can do the strength ones, but they try to stand up on one leg and move it up like this, and they fall over just instantly, because balance is something that we get. So it gives you an opportunity to work on all of them. So flexibility, strength, and balance. And I was thinking about those 3 things and how they apply in all of our lives, particularly as I'm writing about the Tao. And then I decided to write these principles for living a life that's in balance. And being in balance, to me, is about alignment. And I'd like to just take you down that path just a little bit here this morning about what it means to get yourself back into balance in your life. We are out of balance emotionally and in our minds and what we are capable of attracting and doing with ourselves because we're not aligned with our source. We're not aligned with Tao. When you are aligned, it means that whatever thoughts that you have about what it is that you would like to do, that what you would like to create, about how you would like your relationships to go, about your ability to attract prosperity into your life, about your ability or your capacity to heal yourself of anything that might come your way, anything at all that might come your way. If you have the willingness to give the same energy to what it is that you are desiring for yourself. As Katie was going through, can I talk about your eyes? Is that okay? Okay. I'm asking permission in front of thousands of people here. But Katie was literally going blind and had to go through corneal implants from cadavers twice. And as she was getting ready and prepared to do the last one, we were talking, and I would ask her about it. And what always impressed me so much was she would give the kind of energy to what she wanted rather than having it be totally, completely out of balance. And that's what this is all about. So that as she was going in to have a cornea transplanted from a dead person into her eye so that she could see, talk about seeing through another person's eyes, always she would say to me, no, it's going to work out fine. It's going to be great. It is my intention that... And there was never this out of balance kind of thinking which says, this is what I want. This is what I want to attract. This is what I want to create for myself, whatever it might be. In this book, I deal with it in every single area of our lives. I think it's true in addictions and overcoming addictions. It's true if you have obesity problems or weight problems, issues like that. I think it's true in overcoming relationship struggles or difficulties. The opening chapter says, an infinity of forests lies dormant within the dreams of one acorn. Listen to that. An infinity of forests lies dormant within the dreams of one acorn. One little seed has a dream, and that dream is so powerful that it can manifest and create just from that dream inside of that, and it literally can do that. The potential that is in the dreams of this tiny little acorn can bring and attract to the world an endless number of trees. I used to say, anyone can count the number of seeds in an apple, but no one can count the number of apples in one seed. When you have dreams or desires or things that you would like to create or attract for yourself into your life, and they're way up here, they're big, but the Tao says that sages never attempt big things. They don't have to do big things. It says in there's a line that says you can get anywhere from here. As long as you're here in your mind, as long as you stay here with what is true. 19 years ago, I drank every day. I never was drunk. It wasn't like I was out there, out of control or anything. I drank every day. And I had a teacher in India who said, if you want to reach the level of consciousness that I would like you to be able to go to, you'll have to live a life of sobriety. And I said, I have no trouble with sobriety. I just like to have a few beers every day, if you don't mind, after I run. He said, no, you'll have to get yourself to a place where... So, as a sage, if you think of yourself as a sage and you want to undertake this thing of giving up drinking or losing 75 pounds or attracting great wealth into your life or building a great bridge across a divide, whatever it is that you might want to undertake, I think about it when I sit down to write a book. I mean, if you sit down and know that you've got to create 300 or 400 pages that has to be legible, and it has to all fit together, and it has to make sense, and it all has to come from your mind. That's just too big. And people who think big generally end up doing nothing because it's just too daunting a task to do big. But anybody can do here. Anybody can do now. Anybody can do this moment. And so what do you do? It's what I said to my daughter this morning. I say it to her every morning when I pick up the phone, wherever I am. Today is a sober day. Just today. Don't undertake giving up anything big like that. Don't undertake the idea of I've been overweight my whole life, or I've been addicted to something my whole life, and I just want to change that. Let go of that. The great sages don't do difficult things because they never see difficult things. There's nothing difficult out there when all you have to do today is stop smoking. Today. And people say, but it's really difficult. It's really difficult to quit smoking. I said, where do you come up with that? Where do you come up? Is that true? You'll hear Katie this afternoon ask you that question, is this true? Can you prove that it's truth? You'll see. I just want you to, if you haven't seen her do it. She's the master. She's the best in the world at it. Is it true that it's difficult to quit smoking? Hell no, it's not true. What's difficult is smoking. That's what's difficult. That's true. If you smoke, you got to take your money and you got to go out and you got to buy tobacco. And then you've got to carry cigarettes with you wherever you go. And you have to carry fire with you all the time. So now you got to carry tobacco, fire, and you got to give up your money. And we've hardly even gotten started. Now you got to dispose of ashes wherever you go. So you need a disposal place to dispose of now you got to get rid of cigarette butts, and you have to keep your hands, because your hands start to smell after a while when you light up cigarettes, and so do your teeth. And so does your breath. And then when you're driving along and you drop some hot little ash onto your clothes, then you got to reach around like this, and you're on people looking next to you. What is this guy doing? I mean, it's very difficult to smoke. To not smoke, all you have to do is not put a cigarette in your mouth. That's all you have to do. Now, which is difficult and which is easy? What is true and what isn't true? The fact is that almost all of the things that you think of as difficult are only difficult because you've learned to think in difficult terms. And when you make something difficult, you make a decision then not to do it. Why should you do difficult things when you can do easy things? Like give in to an addiction. And so, as you get yourself to this place where you begin to see that difficulty and struggle are all just lies that you've been saying to yourself. And that if I had to give up drinking 19 years ago, when I hadn't gone 10 years, I had gone at least 10 years and had a few beers every single day. I couldn't think of a day in the previous 10 years that I hadn't had a few beers at night. Not one day could I think of. The idea of just saying to myself, okay, I'm going to go 19 years and never have a drink again. That's just enough to send you off on a binge, isn't it? But you can do easy things, and you can get anywhere from here. You ever hear the line, a journey of 1,000 miles? What? Begins with one step. That's right out of the Tao Te Ching. That was Lao Tzu. It's so simple. So when you think about balance in your life, think like this about being in balance. You have a dream. And your dream is to live a life that goes a certain way, that looks a certain way, that feels a certain way. You have a dream that you would like to be able to attract prosperity into your life, that you would like to live a prosperous life. My favorite example, I did it on the PBS show, of the lady sitting next to me from San Francisco who was flying back from Maui after having just done a wedding. And I said to her, what do you do? And she said, I'm a photographer. And I said, oh, how's it going? And she said, I'm never going to get rich at it. Now, this is just a thought. Is it true? I don't know if it's true. How can that be? How can you know if that's true, that you're never going to get rich? You don't know. So I said to her, well, would you like to get rich? This was what I always asked when people ask me. Well, she said, well, of course. She said, who wouldn't want to be rich? Everybody wants to be able to buy the things they want. We all want that. I said, so let me see if I understand. You would like to get rich. That's your dream. But what you offer up to that dream is that it'll never happen. That's out of balance. That's the kind of balance I'm speaking about. Not the kind of balance that allows you to do these kinds of things. The kind of balance that you begin to realize that there's a misalignment, if you will, between what it is that you are thinking and what it is that you offer up in the way of habits to make those dreams a reality. I call it principles for creating habits to match your desire. Listen to this quote. It's from Ralph Waldo Emerson. He said, want, like what you want, is a growing giant whom the coat of have was never large enough to cover. Want is a growing giant whom the coat of have was never large enough to cover. That is, what you want and what you have are completely and totally out of balance. And Lao Tzu says this to you through me. When you put your attention on what you intend to create and you stay aligned with the way, with the source from which you came, it will show up. It has to. It has to. So that all of the deficiencies, all of the things that you want but are not able to manifest, have not manifested yet into your life, all of it is not because the universe isn't working with you. It will. It's because you are not a vibrational match, an energetic match to what it is that you would like to create. And all today is about is learning to change the way you look at your life and understanding that the life that you're living will change just by your changing your opinion about it. It's so beautifully freeing to not be concerned any longer with whether or not what you would like to have is going to show up. One of the favorite lines that Katie has said to me on many occasions is, to believe that you need what you don't have is a definition of insanity. Because it's just not true. And if the thought is not true, what is it going to do to you? It's going to weaken you. It's that you say anything to yourself that is not true. Anything at all. So it's just this really powerful, wonderful knowing. And I think about this when I write in the mornings. And these words just show up. They just come onto the page. And I say, where do they come from? Who owns this stuff? How does it get here? How can any of this be happening right now? There are some times when I am so connected, and that's why I say 3, 4 o'clock in the morning is your best time. It's your calling. It's your wake-up call from God. Because it's the time when there's so few distractions. In Moby Dick, I remember committing this to memory when I was in high school. Here was Herman Melville, who lived up in western Massachusetts in the 19th century. And he would go out into the cornfields to get a feeling of what it must have been like to be out there on the ocean. And he would lie there on the cornfield. Imagine lying on the ground in the cornfield in the middle of August and seeing nothing but corn silk, as far as you can see. That was Ahab out there looking for his Moby Dick. And he wrote these words: "For as this appalling ocean surrounds the verdant land, so in the soul of man lies one insular Tahiti, full of peace and joy, but encompassed by all of the horrors of the half-lived life." Now, if that doesn't give you goosebumps, I mean, that's like writing doesn't get any better than that. That there is within every single one of you, there is an insular Tahiti, surrounded by all of the fears of living the half-lived life. And all of those fears and all of those worries and all of those anxieties keep you from going to that inner Tahiti, that place. And I want to give you something specific that you can do with this. Because when you're lying there in your bed debating whether to get up, or when you're going through all of the troubles and all of the difficulties and all of the things that aren't working, when you're putting your attention on what you don't want, and you can't stop it, and your mind is just this jumble of constant thoughts coming in and coming out. Can you identify with that? It goes on. Almost everybody, every patient I've ever worked with has this kind of thing. There is a way. There is a way. Close your eyes, and just right across the screen, write the word God. G-O-D. God. The instant that you find yourself putting your attention on what you don't want or what doesn't work or what you don't like, the moment that you do that, God. And then take the G out, move it over to the left. And then take the D out and move it over to the right. And now what you have left is 0. The only number that can't be divided. The only representation of what your return trip is about. You're going back to 0. You're going back to a place of oneness that is indivisible. And then just hone in, just go right into the center of that 0. And then put your thoughts on what it is that you intend to manifest. Just like that. Just like that. In that simple little drill or practical thing that I'm offering you right there, it's what I do. It's how I handle it. I go in there and it's like I'll be thinking of, oh my God, I got to fly over here and I got to get over there and then I've got to give a talk and then I've got to get to this plane and my daughter over here and then my son is up in school and I don't know what the hell's going on over here. And it's like this jumble and I just go, God. No G, no D, 0. Move into the 0. Go into the place that's indivisible. That's your source. That's your return trip. And in that place, in that perfect, beautiful, soft, gentle, impenetrable place, you will no longer put your attention on anything that you don't want. It is so simple, ladies and gentlemen. This idea that is at the core of all of our teachings. I've been out there doing this for over 30 years now. Your Erroneous Zones was published 30 years ago. And what I've discovered is what Earl Nightingale told me when I was just getting started in this whole business. When something called the strangest secret. We become what we think about all day long. We become what we think about all day long. But more than that, understanding that your thoughts are real, that they have an impact. Isn't it conceivable that your thought can have an impact on whether or not you can attract what you want into your life? That you can extend it out into a universe which is perfect, which has no need for you to interfere with it, which is always doing exactly what it is supposed to do. No restrictions on it. And it always has been doing it, and it always will be doing it. And everything that you're going through, it's all part of the perfection of all of this. That you are not any of the things that you've come to believe that you are. You're not what you have, you're not what you do, you're not your reputation. You spend a whole lifetime working on understanding that. I'm looking at the things that we believed in the morning of our life. What we were taught, what we were told when we came into this world. What you were told was important for you to do. It's important for you to go to school. It's important for you to get good grades. We throw this stuff at our children. We throw it at ourselves. It's important for you to look a certain way. It's important for you to make the team. It's important for you to defeat somebody else. It's important for you to make a lot of money, to advance in your profession. It's important for you to be a good daughter, to be a good mother, to take care of your family. It's important for you to have goals. It's important for you to figure out what other people are doing and get there ahead of them so that they don't get ahead of you. It's important for you to win. I'm just scratching at the surface here of all of these things that we've been conditioned and told, this is what you're here for, this is what it's about. And you bought into it.
You just hook, line, and sinker. We took it. We all did. I did too. We all did. And then you get to a point, and I just share with you this one observation from Jung called the stages of life. He says, thoroughly unprepared, we take the step into the afternoon of life. Worse still, we take this step with the false presupposition that our truths and ideas will serve as hitherto. But we cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. Hear that. Really hear that, because most of you here are in the afternoon of your life, and it has nothing to do with how old you are, by the way. This can happen at 14, or some of you stay in the morning of your life for 16 lifetimes. We cannot live the afternoon of life according to the program of life's morning. For what was great in the morning of your life, getting the grades, making the cheerleading team, being a good daughter, getting the gold star, saving your money, getting the job, whatever it is, what was great in the morning will be little at evening. And what in the morning was true, which is a big word here today, what in the morning was true will at evening have become a lie. Now imagine how many of us are attempting to live the afternoon of our life by lies. They just don't work anymore. I mean, is the most important thing for you to get ahead of somebody else? To look a certain way? To have the right jewelry on? To get the job? Or is it to be on purpose? Is it to be making a difference? Is it to understand what I wrote about in 10 Secrets for Success, the second secret? That you're not going to die with your music still in you. Is it to know God? Is it to feel close to something so profoundly important that in here there's a knowing that I haven't been actualizing it, I haven't been fulfilling it? What am I here for? What am I here for? It's a question that you begin to ask yourself when I speak about purpose. And then you say, well, it's to be like God. That's what God realization is, to return to that from which you originated, the place of your source, the Tao. To be the Tao, to be it, to be the great way. And what is the Tao like? What does it look like? What is it doing? It's not doing anything. It's just constantly giving. It's just constantly offering. It's just constantly providing life. Billions and billions of life forms emanating from this invisible source that has always been, just continuously doing it. Why aren't you doing that? Why aren't you being like God? God is love, it says in the book of John. And he that dwelleth in love dwelleth in me. Your objective is to be like God. To return to your source, to your Father, whatever you want to call it. And then we take things like organized religion and we think, well, because I'm going to church and I'm doing the right thing. But you have to remember that the source, that the Tao, excludes no one. It excludes no one. It doesn't say you get to breathe and you don't. It does say you get to have hair and you don't. It does those things, right? But it doesn't say you get life and you don't. It says it's for all of you, you're all one. And then we take organizations that say only you get to get in. Only if you believe this way do you get to be part of God. But that's not of God. So any thought that you have that excludes anyone is not a thought of God. It's not a thought of Tao. And that's why the number one source of conflicts on our planet today is about organized religions fighting organized religions. And none of it is of God. Anything that divides us weakens us. Anything. Any thought that you have that divides you from somebody else, that makes you better than somebody else, that says this, any judgmental thought at all like that is not a thought of source. And the minute that you leave source, you lose the power to manifest. You lose the power to attract into your life what you want. You have moved away from source. And any thought that unites us, that includes us, that is of service, any thought of spirit and spirituality that brings us together as one and recognizes the truth that all of us have come from the same source and that we are all breathing the same air and that we all came from the same place. So where does any organization that includes one and excludes other fit on the God realization scale? Way down here. You have to really be careful if you want to live the Tao, if you want to live this thing I'm speaking about and get yourself back into balance, if you want to be in balance, then your habits have to start matching up with your desires in everything that you do. And it's just a simple matter of deciding to do it in all of your thoughts. Every place that you have any thought that is not aligned. Any place, any thought. So here are the thoughts that I'd like you to look at that keep you from the truth of Tao. All right? Every thought that you have that is on what's missing in your life, every thought that you have about what's missing in your life is an energy that allows you to become a vibrational match to attracting more of what's missing in your life. If you are what you think about, then you have to start getting real careful about what you think about. Now you have to start this with being cautious about every conversation that you have with your friends, with your relatives, with your mother, with your husband, with your children, that focuses on what's missing in your life. Because if you want to attract something into your life, something good, something grand, something godlike, something prosperous, something of well-being, health, whatever it might be, if you want to attract that into your life, but you're talking about what's missing and thinking about what's missing, and you understand that what you think about is what expands, you will continue to expand more of what's missing, and you'll continue to attract what's missing in your life. I never talk about what's missing in my life. I only put my attention on what I intend to create. And I have shifted it. And I learned this lesson a long time ago, but the place that it probably expresses it better than any is Esther and Jerry Hicks' book, Ask and It Is Given. The teachings of Abraham, it's called Learning to Manifest Your Desires, have more than anything, I think they're the greatest, among the really greatest teachings on the planet today. And I know Esther and Jerry, I know them well, I've been with them on many occasions. It's about practicing this idea of not putting your thoughts on what is missing and shifting it to it's on its way. It's on its way. It's on its way. 4 words, just get them tattooed someplace inside of you. Whatever it is that you would like to attract into your life, know that it's on its way. And I want to say to you that as you begin to get your thoughts more harmonized with Tao thinking, that is, with the thinking of the source, the thinking of God, that which always has been, that which does nothing but leaves nothing undone, as you begin to more and more harmonize in this way, what happens is that you start elevating your thoughts so that the habit of how you think becomes more harmonized rather than a polarity with what you want to attract. It becomes harmonized with it, and it becomes your natural way of how you think all the time. And you start then beginning to teach your children the same way of thinking. So you just catch them when they start saying things like, oh, with my luck it won't work out. Why have any of us ever learned to say, with my luck, and having it mean things aren't going to work out? Why wouldn't you say, and just have it as your habit, with my luck, it'll probably show up faster than it normally does? Why not have that kind of a way? Because here's what happens. As you begin to shift the way that you think and have an anticipation that this thing is going to work out for you, you can only act upon your thoughts. And as you get these higher and higher thoughts, what happens is that the thought is now more aligned with what it is you want to attract, and then you start acting upon that thought. And as you start acting upon the thought that it will work out, that it's probably on its way, you start to see how this whole system all works. In other words, call it the universe, whatever you want, begins to conspire with you. It begins to act almost in where you suddenly become a collaborator with fate. And instead of fate being something that just might or might not happen to you, you're in collaboration with what it is that you want to attract. I mean, ask any physician, there's physicians here today, ask them about something called the will to live. Ask them about somebody who's going in for a corneal transplant and thinks that I'm going to see when this thing is done, rather than someone who thinks it probably won't work out. And which one would they rather work with? What is this thing called the will to live? What is this thing, this inner kind of thing that says, I refuse to allow myself to think? I say it to my mother, who's 90 years old, almost 91 years old. I was with her for the last 5 days, every day, all morning long with her. And she's been going through some difficulties and so on. Most of you saw her on the PBS show, if you saw The Inspiration. She has always said to me how she was going to die. She said it to me when she was 60. What her death was going to look like, when she was going to die in her sleep, and it was going to be, it was going to be a peaceful thing, and she was going to do it when she was ready. When she was ready, she would leave, and she would know when it was time. And she says, and don't think it's time. I said, well, you got a hangnail there. Maybe we should just move on with it. And she said, no, I'll tell you when I'm ready. But she has always said, I will never allow Alzheimer's into my life. She's always said, that is not something, she'll say things like, well, I can't remember this name quite as well as I did before, but that concept of all, it's just not anything that I've ever allowed myself to think is a possibility. And I said to her, well, what if you're wrong? She'll say, well, who'll know the difference? And they've done research on this, in studies on gerontology, where what does your life look like from 60 plus? Versus what does your life look like from 60 down to into your 20s? That people who live a dynamic life into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, people who feel strong, who don't feel that getting older means that I have to in any way decline any place, physically or mentally. Getting older has nothing to do with the concept of declining. That when people are in their 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, and this is their perception of what their life is going to be like when they're in their 60s, that those people have a much greater chance of not attracting the kinds of diseases that are so much age-related as do people who think of old as infirm and declining throughout their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. That you change the way you believe about that and you say declining is not a possibility. I don't think about what's missing. You don't put your attention on what's missing. You don't tell other people about what's missing. And you don't tell other people about what you can't do and what isn't working and how terrible the world is. And the Tao teaches so much of it was written for leaders, people in positions of power. But I've translated all of that into your own level of leadership. And the great leaders are the ones who eschew violence. You have got to get yourself to a place where you don't allow yourself to have violent thoughts come into your consciousness. That means you got to watch the movies you're watching. That means the games that your children are playing, video games, have got to be monitored and removed when they have violence built into them. It means that you don't watch the news and you don't read the stories, endlessly reaffirming what a terrible place this world is. It is not a terrible place. It's a perfect place. It's a beautiful place. There are just some leaders who are connected to Tao and others who are not. And we can create the kind of world that we want to create when enough of us begin to say, not part of my consciousness. Nope, I don't buy gossip. No, I don't buy violence. No, I don't have anything to do with that. And you just turn the channel, you turn it off. I pick up a Time magazine when I get on a flight, and I go through and I say, I won't read the stories that involve killing. I won't read this. I don't need to hear any more about any more people blowing themselves up. I don't need to continue to have that as a part of my consciousness because I want to be someone who radiates out God-realized thinking. That's what I want to do. And I can't do that if I'm constantly being imbued with that. So I just go through the pages, page. And usually I say, oh, just threw away another $4.95. There's nothing in it to read. Every once in a while, a good story about maybe Tiger Woods or something. But by and large, there's not much in there. And you don't have to fill yourself with that kind of energy. So you don't put your thoughts on what's missing. You don't put your thoughts on what always has been. You don't put your thoughts on what others want for you. Unless you want more of what others want for you to continue to show up into your life. So that if you're having conflicts with anybody that's out there, you don't have to put your attention on any thought that is out of harmony with the relationship that you would like to have. It doesn't have to be. You can have a love story replace a hate story by just changing your thoughts in any moment of your life. As you'll see, some of you will see it this afternoon. As Katie works with some of you and does the work and teaches you to ask yourself these questions about how can you be sure? How can you be sure that that thought is true? Why not have a love relationship with your ex-husband or your ex-wife? Why not have a love relationship with your in-laws? Why not? Why not have it with everyone on the planet? Why not? Indeed, why not? Every moment of your life, this choice is yours. You can either be a host to God or a hostage to your ego. It's your call. God bless you, and thank you for your attention. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you so much.